Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. Today I'm proud to have with me Colonel Dini Sasidharan, who has been an infantry officer for 22 years of his life in the Indian Army. He was a faculty at the Defense Services Staff College, as well as the big fact which I've kept for the last, he was a battalion commander at the Pengong So, the infamous lake where the Chinese clashes took place very recently. Things are still very hot over there. So we have Colonel here to tell us about that area, about how the Indian Army actually does its operations there. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir, and I look
Thank
forward
you.
to your views.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you for inviting me for this show. I think it's a wonderful platform. And my regards to you and to all your viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So, sir, just to begin, I'm going to just lay it out a little broadly. Knowing the area as well as you do about the North Bank and the South Bank of Pangong Tso and various related areas, militarily on the ground, strategically, the objective of the Chinese would have been very different. But militarily on the ground, sir, what were they planning to achieve out of the push that they did?
See, if you put it very simply, militarily, what they were trying to do was, to establish their moral ascendancy on the line of actual control. For a very long time since 1962 after war, we know that there is no understanding that where the LAC is. Each one of us, whether it is Chinese, whether it is Indians, have their own perception. Broadly, in areas there is a broad understanding that is based on traditional way of patrolling and all. Otherwise, you also know that there is no exchange of maps, there is no demarcation on ground. Nothing is there. So there are areas where this problem of overlapping of your perceptions happen. So that is the area where this conflict happen, and that's the area which is traditionally known as the areas of differing perceptions. LAC is known as the areas of differing perceptions by both sides. So both sides know that these are areas where there are two perceptions of the line of actual control. Now, over a period of time, Indian presence or the Indian Armed Forces presence, whether it is the Indian Army, the ITBP, all those places, and even now the Air Force, all those assets and all are coming up. Earlier, it was only the Chinese who used to be there, but of late, when our focus has shifted towards northern borders, we have gradually increased our infrastructure. We have gradually increased our manpower there. So earlier, what used to happen was if a place was visited once a month, or maybe at times even maybe once in 2 months, 3 months, because of the terrain there. The terrain is unforgiving. It's extremely difficult. 16,000, 17,000 feet altitude you have temperatures going down to -30, -40, those kind of things. There are no roads or tracks on the Indian side. So the domination up to the line of actual control was very difficult. But as we started building our infrastructure close to the LAC, so the domination of the line of actual control by our presence increased substantially. Now, as you know, the Chinese used to come because they had developed their infrastructure much in advance. They had their advantage, the first mover advantage there. They had built up everything right up to the LAC, and they had a free run. Now, when the Indian troops started also presenting themselves there, so there is bound to there's a bound to a start of a clash process, which is it is not happening now or something. It has been there throughout for the last about, let's say, 7-8 years. If you see, 2013 there was a huge incident. There was 2014 there was another huge incident. 2017 there was an incident. So this presence of Indian troops has resulted in increased contacts with the Chinese, and increased contact with the PLA or the Chinese troops have increased the clashes, the conflicts with them. So that is the prime reason why these conflicts have happened. And when the conflicts happen, when both nations do not want a war, what next is that who establishes the moral ascendancy that we are the boss here. You listen to our way of life. This is our perception of LAC. You should listen to that. So that attempt was done by the Chinese, that to send a message that do not mess around with us along the line of actual control. We have the capability, or we want to show you what it is. That was the aim of for them to do that, because otherwise, if you see today, after so much of things have undergone, we'll see that Chinese have not done anything other than that substantial. There's no territorial gain. There is nothing else which they have taken us from. So it was basically, my understanding is that it was primarily to send a message, and that message was limited to that place. To that, it of course it is not only that place. It is along the LAC that do not mess around with us, and this also should be seen in the background of the Doklam or the Dolam issue.
So I'm sure the Chinese and us study each other very carefully in that area. And with the kind of technology that the Chinese carry with themselves, I'm sure they're keenly aware of the fact that the Indian Army is pretty good in mountain warfare. A keen example was the war in Kargil, and of course, the exercises that keep happening in eastern Ladakh and everything, so on and so forth. Do you think they kept that into consideration when they actually pushed in an area where they knew that they could be in a disadvantage?
See, Adi, what I've understood of the situation or the entire thing was that, and I've been writing about this also, that this is not what Chinese, wanted to happen. This is not what they wanted to happen. Otherwise, if you just see, because now everybody, when it was happening, everybody was questioning why it was happening, and people are giving a lot of strategic reasons to it. But now, if once it is finished, so at least one thing which is we are very sure is that Chinese did not gain any strategic whatever objectives they were. They have not taken any territory. They have not taken any assurance from us that okay, we will not have any alliance with US or something. Some kind of nothing has happened. They occupied certain territory which was disputed, and now they have vacated that territory after about 8 months. So first point is that the Chinese did not want this to happen. It happened. It happened because there was a skirmish. There was issues along the North Bank, due to which there were frequent clashes between both parties, and that escalation of that clashes took place, which resulted in more and more casualties on both sides. And at some point of time, somebody in the hierarchy of PLA, maybe because of the background of the coronavirus and the entire the globe was blaming them, and then they were on a back foot on many other places. So that there is a tendency, and you start feeling insecure that now everybody is taking me for granted. So let's not show a weak side. Let's show a powerful side, and they then diverted those exercise troops which are troops which are carrying out exercise into this area, and thereby escalated this conflict into a substantial on a substantial scale. So what could have been handled at the ground level was escalated by the Chinese by bringing this huge quantum of troops there, and then the Indians do not have any other option but to reciprocate in kind, and that's what happened. And when we mobilized, and yes, the Chinese did have the first mover advantage, and then when they moved in, they occupied those areas in between Finger 4 and Finger 8 in North Bank and towards Galwan and all those areas. But subsequently, we also mobilized, and then there was a stalemate. Then during the period in which again there was a talks of de-escalation, Galwan happened. Again, according to me, it was not a planned thing. Because of the scale of violence, people were getting because they couldn't use weapons, they were using all other things other than firing. So that's how that violent clash took place, and there were casualties on both sides. So my point is that the Chinese always know that the Indian troops are very well trained as far as mountain warfare is concerned. They know that there is no, because I would put it that more than we know about the PLA knows about us. So they will not take a chance in which the terrain wise there are disadvantage there is a lot of terrain friction there, and as you rightly mentioned that we have an advantage of knowing operating in such in a warfare in which we are very well ahead of the Chinese. So knowingly they will not walk into the trap. It just happened and they didn't know what to do, and then they had to have an honorable exit, and then they extricated themselves much to what they wanted, away from the media and all those things, because by the time 7-8 months 9 months people had almost forgotten that these kind of big issues were happening. So I would put it that Chinese did not do it with the at the start point. Of course after that they as I mentioned they had their own plays and games and all starting, but initially it was not what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you, one of the things that gave us an advantage was the maneuvers. And pretty much this entire battle, if I may use the term very freely, was a battle of maneuvers between the Indian and the Chinese forces. Today, I think firing of a bullet is going to be very expensive for everybody, and it's all going to be maneuvers just to, place in that superiority over the other army. So when we did what we did on the 29th and 30th, as a battalion commander on the ground who let's say, conducted this particular operation, what do you think you would have seen as the Chinese reaction, and how you would have handled it?
See, firstly, let me tell you that at that point of time, the Chinese never expected us to do such a kind of thing. What they would have definitely expected was something in North Bank, that we also trying to jostle them and push them and something like that. But to literally go and occupy certain heights on the South Bank, which was of great importance, and that too, well, of course, well within our side of LAC itself. But then we all know, those who are there on ground, that how important that those places are. Those things Chinese would have never anticipated, and that too also using tanks also into those heights. So definitely Chinese would have initially been surprised. And secondly, they did not know how to react to it. Should they react violently to it? Should they just show the protest, or should they also show and occupy some other places in the near vicinity? I think they chose the third option, because they knew that if it escalates, it can escalate into a real battle, as you mentioned initially. Till now, it was just a skirmish. It was just occupation of heights and those kind of things. So from surprise, they chose an option which was a reaction to what Indians did, so that they have something to show, but they did not consciously escalate it by using fire, or they could have fired upon us. They could have used, of course, there were reports that bullets were fired, but that was on the air. It was not for effect and all. So such like things, they did not deliberately escalate it. So as a battalion commander, when we go for such operations, we take care of all contingencies. It is not that when we anticipate, okay, Chinese will not do it. When we go, naturally we'll take care of all contingencies, and I'm sure the battalion commander on ground also would have done it, and they would have prepared for the worst. He would have prepared for the worst, that everything is coming to him. So those kind of preparations would have taken place, and once finally when they were firm on ground, that is, the operational balance was achieved on ground. I think the Chinese saw it, that there's no point again in banging their head against the wall, because again Indians were on an advantageous position there. So that's why they chose the third option, both for conflict, de-escalation, and also because they would have had a huge disadvantage, because that anybody sitting on a height, it's not easy to evict them, even if it's temporary defenses if you occupy. So definitely all those things are there in the mind of a commanding officer.
So, coming to the daily life of soldiers in a place like that, sir, I mean, of course, the numbers of soldiers that are there today, even just in the back areas, is very, very high. How do soldiers actually go about their lives in waking up, doing their drills, or doing their positioning, eating food? How is it done in that area? I mean, it is unforgiving. Siachen, yes, of course, it's a crazy place, and people train very hard to go to Siachen. But in a place like this, which is equally unforgiving, how does one go about it, sir?
See, Adi, one thing which is very good, Siachen is, Siachen has got its attention, for from very long time, and naturally so, because it is the highest battlefield in the world and such like that. But equally tough is our areas along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. So there are areas which are at 17,000, 18,000 feet. The problem with the advantage with Siachen is that the logistics has been taken care of over a period of time in a very, very efficient manner. So if there is an evacuation, if there is whatever is required, it is pumped in, and people are taken care of there. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, eastern Ladakh attention, it was very late that we started focusing on eastern Ladakh. Things have to improve. It is in the process of improving, whether it is infrastructure and such like that. So that disadvantage the troops have there, because we are still evolving in eastern Ladakh. And as we speak now, tremendous improvement has already taken place. There's no doubt. But definitely there is a huge challenge as far as just staying there, or staying there alive, if I can put it that way, is there. Because for people like you and me, you are from Mysore, I am from Kerala. We are people who are, and mostly like troops from Rajasthan or anywhere, they are all people who are from sea level. Now, of course, we condition our body before going. We have our training schedules before induction and all those things. But still, the basic nature of a human being, or however whatever he is, that always is there. So when you go there, you are now exposed to 15,000, 16,000 feet altitude for 2 years. So that effect is there on your body. The moment you land there, of course, once you land there, you have that acclimatization schedule in which, at 9,000 you are there for 4 5 days 6 days, then you go for to 14,000 for another 4 days and such like things. But still, even after all the acclimatization, all the training, because your body, for the last, you are grown up in a particular manner, it affects. So the endurance comes down, the oxygen level content is less, so your, way of thinking and all those things, you can't read a book freely and all, there. So your body, the weather is there, the effects of weather on the body, all these things are there, so you will feel stressed out very easily, all such like things are there. Despite this, the troops are operating, undertaking all operational tasks. So that is the thing which we should understand. It is not an easy thing that, okay, anywhere troops are meant to be, operating in extreme difficult condition, but here, uh, the fact that you do not have enough oxygen, is a big thing. You can survive in a jungle, you can survive in a desert, water and all those things are there. But if you do not have oxygen, which is the barest, requirement, you have a lot of issues. So that is the background to which these troops serve. They, of course, we have a, proper scientific way of training schedule there. Even while we are there, we have a process in process, so that the body is used to the climate and also. The troops are on a 24-hour cycle, they're constantly busy. They are either training themselves, then they go for operations, they come and look after their own, body. There is a proper drill in which your bodies are, hand and your feet and all are washed, so that, though you don't get some cold related injuries. There's a proper process in which you drink a lot of water, because, as you know, the water content is, the body saps from there, so you have to constantly drink water every bit. For that itself, there is a drill, water parade, we call it. So that process is itself, wherever they go, they'll carry a bottle and such like things. After this, they, of course, they go for their patrolling, and they, do something. So it's a very, very, and those who are technically oriented, they will be looking after their vehicles and such like things. So it's a planned thing, it's an organized thing, but extremely, extremely tough. I have served in all terrains, let me tell you. But I found this particular terrain the most unforgiving. A person who will be a best sportsman, in your peacetime, he may be, the first casualty there. So, you can't predict who is a fit man there. A cross country runner may come there and he'll just fall, because some clot somewhere, and, he just falls. So how do we know that who is fit, who is fit and who is not? So it is a very, very challenging thing. It's a very challenging thing for any soldier to serve there. There's no doubt. But people go there, people serve there, and as I mentioned, that there is a process in which the troop is doing the training, doing his operations, looking after himself, and of course having some free time also, so that he's, mentally de-stressed and such like that.
So, as a commander, sir, some of the challenges that you faced in that area with your troops or with the situation around, would you like to elaborate just on any one of the examples?
As a commander, of course, like both. One is, as I mentioned, is health related issues. Second is the Chinese issue. So, health related issue, what happens is that, we have a post which were about 7 to 8 hours, away from the battalion headquarters, or from where we were, from where, we could. So, if at all a person has some issue health related, if he has to be evacuated, there's a cut-off time due to after which you cannot evacuate him through road. So that decision taking is a very, very critical thing. Now, if you don't take the decision, because if you take the decision, he has to then travel through the night, which is even more, because, like, as late as I think day before yesterday, that we lost two Jawans in Ladakh, if you would have seen in the news, because I think the recovery vehicle toppled. So that is the kind of treacherous area which it is. So if you don't take a decision, then at a particular point of time, you are actually putting that person in trouble. If you delay it, then the entire thing. So, and then if the chopper is not able to come, you are. So such like incidents were there in which, and it is purely because of God's grace that, we did not have a single fatal casualty there when we were serving there. We evacuated, we did, and hats off to the doctors and the nursing assistants and the Jawans there. They also, by, I think, the extreme situations make each person that much more responsible. And there were occasions when we had so many reasons for not for a person to fall ill, but we could recover him because of this. So that was one of the biggest challenges. I mean, I can't place one. There were so many things in which we had such. Then of course the Chinese thing, like we are there on a constant vigil, and we have our observations and all that. When the Chinese come, we also go for it, because we have to give them a face of, that is the procedure which is there. When we go, they also come, and when they come, we have to go. So when situation is normal, there is no issue. There's no hide and seek which is on. Now if there is a problem, there is a conflict, let's say in North Bank, and if they do not allow us to come to reach our particular area, which is finger 8, then we have to do our ways and means of overcoming that, so that we complete our task. Similarly, they also do. So there are occasions in which we had to do various you know um, if I can put it, lot of adaptations, and little bit of methods in which we could reach our task. And then the Chinese were surprised. So then we have to actually literally put ourselves in such a way that whenever because we knew that now the Chinese would come, so our troops were outside. We wait outside, we wait for them, and and then they also started playing those games. So these kind of things happen. Then some structures come in between. Then we destroy that. Then they do. So all those things are part of the game. And I think those kind of things are never discussed outside, but these all things are happening there on ground. That's all I can say about that.
So just to get an idea of how many times this sort of an activity take place, let's say in a month, it's probably, let's say, 2 or 3 times when something like this happens.
See, Adi, what happens is that there is a schedule of patrolling which both sides have. That's a known thing. Okay, we go for, let's say, earlier, as I mentioned, it was once a month. Now it would probably be, let's say, once a week or twice a week. So twice a week we go to a particular place along the line of actual control, so that we show our presence there. Similarly, the Chinese also have. So if we are coming for 2 times, they will also come for 2 times. So that makes 4 times a week. So what earlier used to happen once or twice is now a month. Now is happening 4 times a week. So this kind of, in this 4 times a week, if like now what is happening now, there is no patrolling, but if the situation is peaceful, 4 times it will be peaceful, absolutely no issues. Okay, you will come, he will come to our area, we will go to his area, that our perceived LAC, and he will come to his perceived, and there's no issue, and there's a lot of friendly exchanges, and friendships, and those kind of things are there. But the problem starts when there is a issue. When there is an issue of not completing our task, or some change of status quo has come, instead of 10 people they brought 20, so then we bring 40, then there is some, there is a vehicle which has come inside which should not have come inside, there is a bunker which has been created which should not have been created. Such like things keep happening. So then what happens is that there is a face off, and that the people stand there staring at each other, and while the officers are talking to each other and all. If they can resolve at their end, fine. If not, then you call for a flag meeting, and then both official commanders come and they speak to each other at the flag meeting, and then they take a decision, and it is resolved. So about 90% of the cases it used to be resolved like that. But still there were 1 or 2 cases in which actually a physical fight or a pushing and all used to take place. That's a fact. Because see, when you know that there are 2 armies, and professional armies, we should not say that PLA army is some they are also professional army. They also come, they are also fighting for whatever they believe their causes, and we are fighting for what we believe are our causes. So then what happens is that, as I mentioned, the terrain, everything plays on the minds of the soldiers. He has family at home. There are thousands of things happening in his mind. Then the officers are speaking. So somebody is staring at you. He may not like the stare. And then there's a language problem. Okay, Chinese may say something. He is saying in Hindi, and they don't understand. For all you know, he may be saying, and like if our troops are from Haryana or somewhere, some place, they may feel the way they speak may feel it may look offensive, but actually they may be saying wishing them. So those kind of things are there. Those kind of problems are also there. So suddenly, there you will find some fist fight has erupted, and those kind of things are there. So it is a fact that of all these patrols, sometimes there is a jostling and all those things, but the scale at which this violence happened this time was phenomenal. So there's no doubt that those kind of things were never seen before.
Interesting, sir. So, as far as on the ground, there is some amount of psychological warfare that goes around between the troops at a very local area level. I'm not talking about a national level or a sector level even. I'm talking about troops facing each other. We heard in the news that the Chinese were playing Punjabi music, and then suddenly there were videos of our soldiers dancing that came out. This is all part of that particular game that we play. I also heard from somewhere, although unconfirmed, that we played Tibetan national anthem in the Pangong So when the SFF actually went up. Would you like to elaborate and probably share an example of something like this? Because these are we always hear what happens to us.
Absolutely.
A few examples where we have actually done something is far and few between. It's not spoken about for very many reasons. But if there is something that the people can know, I'm sure it will be beneficial for all of us.
See, Adi, this kind of, as I mentioned, with the very first question which you asked, why did the Chinese do this? The Chinese did this because they want to establish their supremacy, that they are the boss there. That is the kind of message which they wanted to send, give to the Indian army, and that's what they did. So, and now coming to your question, all these actions are somehow linked to that. Who is the boss? Who is we are not we will not take anybody those kind of things. So they at all times do play these games. Sometimes they and especially when there is a conflict, they do it more. But even otherwise also, both sides make an endeavor to bring their best phase ahead. The best, for example, if there is a peaceful meeting of two sides during the border personal meeting, I've attended meetings. The Chinese go overboard in their hospitality, in the way they look after the Indian officers and the Jawans and all. If there is a cultural event, if there is a proper organized cultural meets between both sides along the LAC. So they make sure that they show their best face. That also is part of PSYOPs, that they're showing everything whatever their best thing. Similarly, when we do it, we also show our best. We bring our best to the troops. Dances and such like things. Also, we also show, and the place where this meeting itself was renovated and it's become fantastic. So those kind of things are also there. Apart from this, when the troops meet, they're also that body language, the conduct, those kind of things. Like I'll give you an example that when the surgical strikes took place against Pakistan. So one of the patrols, when they went, the normal patrolling was there. My officer also was there, and their officer also had come. So he just asked, "Hey, we heard that you did a surgical strike. I hope you're not doing it. Will you be doing on us also?" This is what, and this was in 17. So this officer said, "We don't do surgical strikes on friends." So they were, they were very happy. They were, yes, and those kinds. So see, they were trying to give a message that we are aware of what is happening, and our officer also played it in the same way, that we don't carry out surgical strikes on friends. So that's how these kind of mind games are played there. Those kind of things are there. Everybody understands that it is there, and like you have a strong mustache. I'll give you another example. My troops are Rajput troops, so we also ensure that the physical appearance of the troops who are there. Everybody had a big mustache, and that them. And I'm sure the Chinese also would be doing it, but naturally we have an advantage of we are all our troops are 6 feet too, and you keep your best troops ahead of them, all those things. So with the mustache and all, they are when you look to them only, you'll feel that that kind of fear factor should come in. So those kind of games definitely at the lower level we have, and that I think it's a fair thing to do. And in the conflict issue, it was of course taken to a different level, and I think my personal opinion is that the Chinese PSYOPs were pretty bad, or pretty very very the standard was substandard, if I can the standard was very low, if I can put it that way. Whatever we saw from Global Times and such like things was quite not what we expected of the Chinese. Yeah.
So you actually expected them to play a better game so that
yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting, sir. And I think that as far as the positioning and the show is concerned, the Chinese would be in a great disadvantage, because Indian Army is one of the best drilled armies in the world. So when our soldiers will go there in their drills and in their attire and in their entire this thing, it's going to be obviously quite scary for a Chinaman to look up and say, "Boss, I'm in trouble." So your experience with a Chinese commander, have you ever had an argument of some sort where things had to be calmed down because of a certain thing, or you've had a good, pleasant interaction? Anything that you'd like to share?
Absolutely, Adi. I had both. To be honest, there were occasions in which there were conflict happening, and as commanding officer, we had to go on ground. But luckily for us, that we could resolve the matter between me and my opposite counterpart from the PLA on the ground. We could do it, despite the fact that there was a lot of tension there. But whatever, we could speak to each other and we could resolve and we could restore the status quo. And of course, there were lot many instances in which there were a lot of friendly exchanges also, both along the line of actual control and along the when we have you used to have meetings and all. So as I mentioned, they are a professional army. It is not that they are not a something of low quality or something, but they have their own problems in which, because they are accountable to a particular political way of functioning. We as a democratic nations we are used to a particular way of functioning. So the cultural differences are there, but notwithstanding that, they used to give respect. The soldiers used to give respect to a commanding officer. Similarly, our soldiers also used to give them respect to the officers. So it used to be both ways. So in case there, and let us be honest. India, as a nation, our culture does not, we don't show disrespect to anybody anyway. That is, and especially armed forces. You are yourself from a Fauji background. You know that we go out of our way to show respect to others. But when that respect is not responded in the same way, then we also know how to deal with it. So it is not that we are a peaceful army and we only think. No, when we know that our respect has been taken for granted, and then there's a time to give a message, that message is given in the language in which the Chinese understands. There is no doubt. So, and I also realized that the Chinese respect strength. So when your spine is upright, when you know that you're not going to bend in any possible manner, he will respect you. And today, with a lot of experience and I can say that Indian Army, in the position where they are, no officer or no Jawan will be looking down and okay, no, they are absolutely clear that there's a task which is there given to them, and no matter what, they will do it polite but firm. They will, if you can agree with it, politeness, good. But otherwise, they will deal with it firmly, but in a most professional manner. So I have had the experience of both resolving conflicts and also extremely friendly exchanges between the commanders there.
With the same person, sir?
Yeah, with multiple. No, actually, yeah, with the same person, with the same commander. Of course, I met him on the ground, and then during a meeting again we met him during the border personnel meeting. Also, again I met him, and similarly there were also occasions in which those commanders then they never came for the meeting. Somebody else who higher up had come for the meeting, but this particular instance in which there were also the same commander who was there on ground, and then it was requested that we'll have a flag meeting, and then they came over for a flag meeting, and then we spoke. So with the same commander, I had good conflict resolution also, and also a friendly talk during the flag meeting.
So I have a last question, sir. There is, with this entire standoff, there is only one big thing which is still pending. I think more or less the rest of the areas are pretty much under control and things are calmed down. At the first phase of the disengagement, as has been planned, no patrolling right now, there is no face-off, there's nothing. The one area which is still under concern is Dapsang, and it has been portrayed to be a whole lot in one aspect, with not giving the real picture that this thing is not new. It has basically been on since 2013. It's not something which happened in April, May or June of last year. It has been combined with this face-off, but the major face-off happened in Galwan and Pangong. So what do you think is the way forward in Dapsang? Have you been there, and what do you think is the way forward?
See, Adi, you actually brought it out very correctly that this is not happening for the first time. Dapsang has always been an issue which is there, which has been there for a very long time. And again, the problem is of both sides trying to go to their patrolling points and not able to complete. The reaching up to a patrolling point is known as the completion of tasks. So both sides are not able to do it, and that's why the conflict is there. This has been happening in all summers. When I say this particular time when the harsh winters are out, So that is the time when every year you will find that this issue is there, and that issue is precisely because both sides do not recognize the LAC. So there is nothing new, and the only issue is that that area is, there is operationally it is much more suitable for tanks and all those things. So it gets a little more limelight. But other than that, there is nothing which is happening which has not happened before. It is precisely like all years what happened every year during this period of time when both parties come, and in cases they also occupy that place and keep sitting there for months, till the time there's the talks, and then finally they'll resolve, okay, the temperatures are going down, and things like that, and then they go back. So this is happening, this has been happening throughout. There's nothing which is happening now. This time also the same issue is there, and I'm very sure that by the by talks, since they could resolve all those issues which were much more in the media, in the international limelight, I'm sure that Dapsang issue also will be resolved. And as far as, even if it is not resolved that completely, in the sense if the troops are not going back, but there will be, the chances of conflict is very, very less. Physical thing is very, very less there. But as you know, the troops in contact you cannot predict, but chances are less, and I'm sure during next round of talks and all, that also will be solved. But nothing out of it is nothing which is happening new, is the underlying factor which we should understand.
Mm-hmm. I think what you also said, the chances of conflict are very less, is something which is not understood by a lot of non-defense defense analysts. Absolutely. Because it's about creating a hype about a situation where, yes, the situation is serious. They do aggressions in our territory. They are doing what you say they are doing. But of course, it's not something which is a brand new phenomenon as what happened in the Pangong Tso. The kind of strength that they came in, it was a different scenario. I agree with you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me today, and sir, providing me some very, very wonderful insights of a commander on the ground at Pangong Tso. We spoke about the Chinese objective for a little bit and talked about how a soldier actually lives his life in that area with some examples, which I'm sure cannot be found anywhere. So it's a pleasure talking to you. And once again, I'd like to thank you for the services that you've given and your time today.
Thank you, Adi. It was really a pleasure speaking to you, and especially with a person who has some background knowledge, who understands what is to be done. Otherwise, there are people who do not understand the thing, and they're looking for sensationalism. You have kept to pure the subject matter itself. It's wonderful interacting. It was wonderful interacting with you, Adi. I wish you all the best, and to your YouTube channel. And thank you very much. Thank you for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.